Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Good to see some new faces as well as some of the former attendees. Welcome to our second part of this, I don't know what we want to call it, reflection or delving into the mystery of the life of God, living the Trinitarian life. And hopefully you've had an opportunity to reflect on the material that we covered last time. And for those of you that were not able to be here, I don't know if you know, but we did have a video. We were fortunate to be able to video the first part, and it is available. It's on the parish website. So if you have seen it, wonderful, and if you haven't and would like to go into that, it is available for your viewing. So as we begin, I found a video that I wanted to start with, just to kind of put us in a frame of mind. Let's see if we got this.
You may have just turned it off, Bob.
Did I turn it off or turn it on?
There you go.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
In the end, it is love that matters. All else will pass away. We need a thoughtful love, a wisdom that sees and knows more deeply, a faith that trusts in the power of God who lives beneath our wings. Ours is the age of something radically new. It is more than a reformation. It is an evolution in love. It is not simply we humans who are in evolution, but God seeks to evolve, to become more being in love, more conscious, more God at the heart of the universe. This is the truth that sets us free, the light that eludes our sight. We are the privileged bearers of transcendence. God cannot do for us what we must do for ourselves. Empty our lives of the inner clutter and noise so that we may welcome God within. Only when we allow God to be God for us can God save us. Because divine love can do no other than make whole. God's love is unmanageable and unruly. It is creative, spontaneous, and novel. It slips in between our controlling urges and dwells in the unbearable wholeness of our being. What a cunning God this is, who hides in lepers and appears in a poor man carpenter turned preacher. Divine love is beyond what the human mind can imagine or invent. It is not logical or predictable. It has empowered life from the beginning and promises to stay forever because love is ever new, ever more whole, deepening the rich creativity of life's playfulness. We all have a part in this unfolding love. We are all wholes within wholes, persons within persons, religions within religions. We are one body, and we seek one mind and heart, more personal and unified in love. This urging toward oneness is an invitation to evolve the divine. We must enfold the past into the quantum moment and let us aim toward the future. For up ahead is the Christ, rising from the dead in the darkness of night, to become for us the God of the future.
Some pretty broad conceptual words, talking about a wholeness, a oneness, but also a becoming. And it challenges us in many ways to what we might think of as our traditional understanding. And as we begin, I think we need to set ourselves into a stance of receptivity to growth. And when you think about growth, we're in the spring now, so we're seeing a lot of that happen. Things breaking out, breaking forth. Growth is an effort. As I watch a seed germinate in one of my planters at home, and it just doesn't jump out of the soil. You can almost see its effort trying to push the soil away. It doesn't make it in one try. It's like how many hours, how many days is it going to take for that thing to pop up? And even when it pops up, the leaves aren't all out there. Maybe the seed, I have okra plants, and the seed is a very hard shell, and it kind of got the leaves pinched together, and you want to go in there and take the seed apart. And the first time I tried that, I just tore the leaves off. It's like that old story of someone who was trying to help a butterfly get out of the cocoon, and the struggle that the butterfly goes through to get its wings out of that cocoon is what pumps the life fluid into those wings, gives it the ability to fly. And if you help it out, it won't be able to fly. So the struggle is a critical part. And before we started this morning, I was talking with one of you about the idea that in suffering, there is no love without suffering. Think about it. If you love someone or something, connected with that love is some kind of suffering. When things don't go well for the one that you love, you suffer along with them. If you get separated from them, you suffer. Suffering is part of life. To grow, to become closer, involves some suffering. So there are elements that maybe to learn, you got to go through the effort of study. You got to go, got to take the test to prove that I've learned it. Oh, teacher, why do I keep giving it? Why do I have to read this book? And how many times do you have to read and study something before you actually remember it? And even if you remember it, how long does it take you to incorporate it into your life? I remember when I was the director of campus ministry at Vianney High School and teaching some of the religion classes in addition. And I kind of stumbled on my favorite way to test. And it was kind of unusual, I thought. And now it seems to me to be a very normal way if you want to really understand the person's understanding of the material. And that is, I would ask 3 questions. I would say, what are the 10 most important things you learned in this period? Whether it was a 2-week section on a chapter or a semester test or even the final exam. What are the 10 most important things you learned? Why are they important? And if they're important, how have they changed your life? Or how could they change your life? And of course, the first question, you never told us what are the 10 most important things you taught. I said, I didn't ask you what the 10 most important things I thought I taught. I asked you what were the 10 most important things you learned. And well, they thought that was just fantastic because they could come up with anything. But then they got to question 2, which was, now I got to say why I think this is important. And they got to think about it. And even if they were, trying to make something up, they had to make something up that made sense, at least to them. And then that 3rd question, well, if it's really important to you, how has it changed your life? Or how could it change your life? And it just it was like they were being suckered one small step at a time to reflect on the material that was presented to them and to get, even in a make-believe sort of way, pretend that it was important. Sometimes I think that's what God does to us. Because it just seems to me that I have to go through things time and time again before I learn. And I can't imagine a God that is supposed to be unconditionally loving hold me accountable for the mistakes when he wants me to explore, when he wants me to find, come up with the important things that I've learned in my life. One of the things I said in that first part was that if God is love, God isn't just a person or a thing that loves. God is love, we read in Scripture. Then everything we understand or everything God does, everything we understand about God or everything that God does, we have to see through the eyes, through the filter of love. So even a God of justice, the justice must be seen through the filter of love. And when we approach it that way, we see that justice from a punishment perspective doesn't make sense. Love doesn't punish. Love corrects. Love makes better. Love helps, assists. And so justice is not retributive, a punishing justice, divine justice. It's restorative. Look, I make all things new, God tells us. Brings it back to its fullness, back to its correctness. So divine justice seen through the eyes of love, filtered, bubbling up through love, is different. And it's the same with everything. Creation, seen through the eyes of love. Even illness, seen through the eyes of love. Somehow, somewhere, God is present in there. I wrote in one of my flock notes, and I can't remember exactly when, but in the past year, I think. There's a divine economy. God lets nothing go to waste. And the proof we have of that is the cross. A terrible thing. But with that, God saves the world. God brings life out of death. God proves that even death cannot stop God's love, God's presence, God's effect. That everything is permeated with God's love. And I think that's what we heard in that opening piece. That we have to see things through these eyes of love. And in the first gathering that we had, we talked about this idea of the Trinitarian life as a life of perfect loving. The Father loving the Son so much, welcoming the mere existence of the Son, not feeling threatened by the Son, and not being possessive of the Father's abilities and power, but sharing it and just letting it go, just giving it totally to the Son, holding nothing back. And that was the big thing that Paul writes about. Jesus didn't deem equality with God something to be grasped at, something to be possessed and held, but let it go. Kenosis was the Greek word. And the life, the Trinitarian life, is a life of kenosis, of letting go, welcoming and letting go, not possessing. And the early fathers, they called this holy detachment. Because if we think about detachment, I'm pretty much detached from that. In other words, I don't care about that. Oh, no, God cares. It's holy detachment. And a little bit more mundane, populist maybe way of saying holy detachment would be saying God just lets it go, doesn't hold on to it. And love, Richard Rohr says, love is diffusive of itself. Just gives. Think about it. The one that you love the most, you can't do enough for them. That's being diffusive. Just give. Your heart just gives. And it's not you that's doing the giving. It's God in you. You're going along with it. You're not restricting it. You're going on that journey with God. And I think the words that we heard from Ilia Delio were saying that too. We're part of this journey. This is our spiritual journey, if you will. But I don't know, why do we call it spiritual? Because everything is spiritual. God created everything. This life that we talked about, the divine life of welcoming and letting go, we're invited to it. We're not only invited to it, we're part of it. That's why we were created. We're part of this diffusion of love. We're manifesting maybe imperfectly, but we're manifesting the divine. We're a piece of art of God's creation. And in that, we talk about being invited. Come follow me. And we passed out the prayer card last time, the Rublev icon of the Trinity, with the Trinity sitting at a table, but the table's got four sides to it. And the perspective in looking at the picture is the viewer is at the fourth side. You're sitting at the table with the Trinity. That's a subliminal way of saying you're part. You're part of this dance. And just not you individually, but everything is part of the dance. I don't know how accurate it really is, but the best way we seem to be able to describe it might be is that we're at the pinnacle of the evolution of the manifestation of the divine. The pinnacle for humans, but we're not the fullness of it. The fullness of that human pinnacle of evolution is Jesus Christ, the real presence. But in another way of understanding, everything is the real presence if it's manifesting the divine. The question is, how well are we manifesting it? How are we blocking it? And so in that invitation, we talked about the obstacles, didn't we? The real you. In that pamphlet that I wrote, and nothing that I've come up with, I just assembled the thinking of so many previous writers, theologians, and mystics dealing with. And we've got to understand ourselves that much better through psychology, which really we didn't get to anywhere of understanding of the human mind and human nature only in the last 150, 200 years at most. Not that there wasn't insight into human nature but it wasn't assembled into a body of knowledge and if you will, of a science that it has got to be. And then the association with the physical, not just the mental elements, now the physical. And we're understanding through quantum theory, quantum physics, how matter and energy are essentially the same, but just in different states. It's what speed are they moving at? This is a growth, and it can be painful because we get to depend upon the old ways, don't we? So we're challenged, and we're challenged to participate in the Trinitarian life, challenged by our imperfections, the obstacles, our false self. The self that we and culture and family and friends and whatever have created of ourselves. And like to mature, to grow older, to become more responsible, right? And a mature person is more responsible, understands the way, well, that can be painful. Teenage years, I mean, my gosh, the growing up that they do from 12 to 18. I'm getting ready in another couple months, I'll be turning 80. I'm not sure if the teenage years is any more challenging and demanding about growing up than aging. And it's all, I think I've become more sensitive to this idea that through all of life, we have been challenged to welcome and let go. It's like it's the very heartbeat of creation, which when you think about it makes sense. If the Creator is love, and the face of love is welcoming and letting go. That is how the Trinity is acting within itself. Welcoming and letting go. This dance that the early church fathers called it perichoresis. This movement is it's a dance of welcoming and letting go. And we talked about in the first session that, well, what does welcoming and letting go look like? And we identified, well, in the Trinity, a perfect dance of welcoming and letting go. It's just celebrating. They're just celebrating their existence, their love. What else is there to do? It's perfect. There's nothing. But again, love being diffusive of itself, it creates. And so it created. And initial creation is perfect. I mean, if you think about it, a tree, it is what it is. It doesn't have the free will to say, I want to become a daisy. The dog doesn't say, I'd rather be a cat. It's only the human being made in the image and likeness of God. Well, in a certain way, everything is made in the image and likeness of God. But somehow we're a lot more in the image and likeness of God with this free will, because we can stop the dance. We don't have to dance, be welcoming. We can be possessive. We've got to grow into understanding the way the system works. You need to welcome and let go for things to flow, to work, to fit, to function. The better you welcome and let go, so you celebrate what is worth celebrating. But what does the divine do when it comes into contact with imperfection, with something that's blocking the flow? It doesn't condemn, does it? Mercy upon mercy. We just celebrated Mercy Sunday. St. John Paul II wanted to emphasize this idea of eternal, total mercy upon mercy upon mercy. It's forbearance. God gives us the time necessary to grow up. Can you imagine if the first time a 6-month-old did something wrong, you punished it? Well, in relation to God, I don't know, even at 79 and 10 months, if he doesn't still think of me as a 6-month-old. It's like somebody saying, I'm closer to God because I'm holier than you. And it's like somebody that's, at sea level and I'm closer to the moon than you are, and they're at the top of Mount Everest. Yeah, well, it's still a few hours away. Or I'm closer to the sun than you. It's all relative. Relative. And that's what we're starting to see, is how everything is related. And the core concept of relationship is the Trinity. And so we talked about dance steps, right? The celebrating the mercy, the forbearance, giving it time to learn, to grow, to become. See, this is the fundamental proof of divine hope, the virtue of hope. If you couldn't change, there's no hope for you. Think about it. Without hope, what do you got? You're where you're at. But we all hope. We hope to, you hope to find someone to spend your life with. You hope to get a good job. You hope to win the lottery. And if all that is taken away from you, and it's, no, man, you're stuck there in that crib for the rest of your life. No hope to even learn to walk or to play. And so divine hope tells us that you've got to give it time. Forbear. And that's mercy upon mercy, compassion. And we learn that not just stopping there, but God actually provides what's necessary to grow. Even the lilies of the field neither toil nor spin, but they get everything they need from God. And so what's our part in this Trinitarian dance? The dance of the Trinity. Welcome and let go, we said, right? And the face of welcoming, letting go is the celebrating what can be celebrated, forbearing, having mercy on that which is not worth, that ain't worth celebrating yet. Come on, take a step. Oh, look, you're walking, yay, let's celebrate that. But until you learn to walk, we forbear, and we help, we encourage, we give you a hand. Learning to ride a bike, drive a car. Oh, some forbearance. And so what does celebrating and forbearing and helping, restoring look like? See, there's probably a good question to always say, well, if I want to do this, what does that look like? Okay. And I talk about it as, since the early fathers talked about perichoresis, it's the dance, I talked about dance steps. Jesus has another word for it. And by, a tree by its fruits. What is it manifesting? What is your life manifesting? You claim to be Christian, you claim to be Catholic, you claim to be Hindu, you claim to be Muslim. What is it manifesting? What are the fruits? Claim to be American, you claim to be whatever. You claim to be a teacher. What are the fruits? So what do you do? Produce, manifest. I wrote a pamphlet called Road Signs and Waypoints along the spiritual journey, and it becomes an interesting way to look at it. So we talk about a journey of transformation, of growth, of becoming. And the last time I talked about the fullness of being human. And that's what Jesus showed us, how to fully be human. We used to say, oh, I'm only human, meaning I'm imperfect. And that's a quasi-misnomer. To be fully human is to be participating in the Trinitarian dance, because that's what Jesus showed us. By welcoming and letting go, by celebrating, forbearing, and restoring, where we have the power, the ability. We're not just human, we're sharing in the divine. It's what the early church fathers, St. Irenaeus was a great defender and promoter of the concept of divinization, where human grow into, transform into the divine. Thomas Aquinas, and I mentioned, referred to it as what God is by nature, we are through grace. We partake, we have the ability to partake in the divine nature. That's what's implanted in us. The presence of the divine is within us. Temples of the Holy Spirit. It's what the Hindus are proclaiming basically when they say namaste, isn't it? The God in me acknowledges the God in you. In the image and likeness. And so we look at what are these particular dance steps? What are these fruits of welcoming and letting go? So if looking through the filter of love, we see a spirit of welcoming, a spirit of non-possessiveness, a holy detachment of letting go. What do we see? Well, one thing is, through divine hope, we're optimistic. The sun will come out tomorrow. There is always hope. Resurrection always follows crucifixion. Daily, multiple times a day, we have these little deaths. I showed up an hour early this morning. Not because I intended to, because I thought we were starting an hour earlier than what we really were. Being 79 and 10 months has some deficits to it. At least I was an hour early and not an hour late. I think I mentioned last time that Richard Rohr prays for a good humiliation every day. You know, and okay. I even called Steve and Steve, where is everybody? Oh, okay. Well, with every humiliation, with every death, I can look forward to a resurrection. And once you learn that, dying doesn't become as difficult. The humiliations aren't as painful. And the ultimate death is just a hiccup on the road of life. Another fruit, being non-judgmental. Judge not, lest ye be judged. As you start to dance this dance of welcoming and letting go, of celebrating and forbearing, you realize that there, but for the grace of God, go I. We don't hear that much anymore, do we? How about being aware of how you manifest similar, if not identical, imperfections that irritate the heck out of you that somebody else is doing? You know, anytime something irritates you about somebody else or something, turn around and look at yourself. Remember, anytime you point a finger, there's three of them pointing right back at you, saying, don't forget to look at the beam in your eye before you try to take the speck out of the other person's eye. Scripture starts to come alive with insight when we start focusing on welcoming and letting go, on the fruits. You start to live out of a fundamental stance of joy. This optimistic attitude you start seeing the positive because you're looking for something to celebrate. This is not going very well. Is there a pony in this pile of horse manure somewhere? You live out of this fundamental stance of joy, peace, contentment. It's not like, oh, my glass is half empty. No, my glass is half full. Oh my gosh, my glass is almost empty. Oh, look, I've got something to quench my thirst. Julian of Norwich, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. Famous. All will be well. All is well. Absent of insult, hurt feelings, frustration, anxiety, fear, worry, condemnation, and anger. Why? I'm the handmaid of the Lord. I am so blessed. God is with me. Who should I fear? I walk with God. God walks with me. Even when there's only one set of footprints in the sand, I'm being carried. The fruit becomes generosity in time, talent, and treasure. You, like the divine, start to become diffusive of yourself, giving, letting go, not holding on. Resources aren't limited because you feel the flow of love and blessings and giftedness coming into your life. You acknowledge it by sharing. And it's not a sharing of, well, I've got two, you get one. Ultimate love is you need, I give. Even if it's the last, it's my last coat, my last pair of shoes. I'm willing to suffer out of love of you, which is the true symbol of the cross. I will not change my preaching. I will not change my living. I will not change the rightful flow to accommodate your blindness. I will speak truth to power. And let the chips fall where they may, because I know even in death there is life. Whether it's in humiliation, a death of humiliation, or a death of loss of job, or a death of loss of friends or associates or wealth or whatever it is, I will do what is right. I trust in the Lord. Now, these are not low standards. These are pretty hefty fruits. You start to have the ability, you forbear, you truly forgive, you don't hold grudges. You look for ways to help, to heal, to restore that which is not whole, complete. You see everything as one. You see the divine handprint presence in everything. These fruits are powerful. And I dare say not one of us here or there have the full ripeness of any of these fruits. We're on the journey, aren't we? And that's why I talk about, it's probably best to think of these as, well, how many of you do any gardening at all? You know, you've grown some stuff, you know, does the plant, it takes time, the seed to pop out of the ground and you know, okay, come on, where are the buds? Where are the buds? Okay, now get bigger, get bigger, get bigger. You know, okay, waiting for that bell pepper to turn from green to red, because the red are sweet. You know, I want, you know, ripeness, and it takes time, right? It develops, it goes through stages. Right? Well, on a journey, you've got road signs and you've got waypoints. Road signs showing you you're on the right track, or you're not. Road signs also can become waypoints in that, well, I know I've gotten this far. You know, I'm looking for the Shell gas station on the corner. And okay, I got to my first waypoint. You know, with GPSs now, we don't have to, you know, it does everything automatically. But when you used to read a map, had to use maps, you know, you're looking for specific things. And even before when you didn't have maps, you over time in practice going the same route, you would know, I need to turn here at this house, the house with the green gables or whatever. You're looking, and so waypoints and become things like light switches, rheostats, okay? Your fruit isn't popping out totally right. There's stages along the way, okay? And so you don't necessarily become totally optimistic. The glass has always got something in it overnight, do you? Takes a while. You don't become non-judgmental overnight. Doesn't pop out of the ground. As soon as you say, oh, I recognize that, I shouldn't be judgmental. Well, good. I'm done with that now. No, we got a lot to overcome. That pamphlet I gave to you last time, the human condition. There's a lot of things we struggle with, and it takes. I love the analogy of for computers, when you delete, it's automatically gone, right? Never can be found again. No, we know. We learned that just because you hit the delete button, it's not gone, it's there. You gotta ride over it, you gotta ride over it, you gotta ride over it. You know, it's like building a habit. If you got a bad habit, you gotta start a counter habit. And you gotta practice it. And in psychology, I remember reading one time where it said, in order to establish a habit, you gotta do something about 2 weeks regularly. And then you've kind of built an onboard sense of that if you don't do it, you don't feel right, complete. So if you want to get your kids to brush their teeth every day, get them to do it at the same time for 2 weeks in a row. And that is not going to be perfect. And if you want to get rid of something on the computer, you got to write over it. They found that you got to write over it a lot of times, and even if they want to, they can still. In other words, it's so ingrained. And stuff that you've been used to doing for 20 or 30 or 40 or 79 years. I remember, I was 50 years old when I first realized that if I put something on my plate, I was going to eat it, even if it was too much. Because by God, I was going to leave the table with a clean plate. Wonder where I learned that. Bless my mother. Well-intentioned. And yet, 50 years old, and of course, I still struggle with, now I can at least say, I'm going to leave something on the plate no matter what. But I feel a lot better when I clean my plate. And so now, you got to work on, don't put it on the plate. Don't put it on the plate. Now, there's also a spirit of holy detachment, a spirit of letting go, non-possessiveness. Having a neutral allure towards material things. A neutral allure. Physical pleasures or personal needs do not have to be fulfilled. These needs and wants aren't demands. At best, they're preferences. There's a real tough one. The welcoming fruits, as tough as they are to achieve, these letting go. Think of the things that you would really revolt if you couldn't get satisfied. Whatever it might be. Being first in line, getting the people out of the way so you can get what you want, so you can check out. The biggest pork chop on the platter. Or I don't like that food, I want something else. Can you be satisfied with a grilled cheese sandwich as opposed to needing that barbecued chicken? Can you be satisfied with a less than spectacular car, house, set of dishes? Challenges. But your wants and needs. See, you have total faith in this fruit, in the providence of God. God will provide what I need. Am I not better than a lily of the field? Challenging to learn these steps. We don't place expectations on ourselves or on others to change or to conform to something that we perceive or even know is the right way. No expectations. We may work towards being better, but God doesn't have expectations on us. Because God knows whether we're going to do it or not already. So God can't be disappointed in us. God has hopes. That's why God forbears. Because God knows in time we'll see the light. Because God has all the time in the world. Remember, for our day, it's 1,000 years for God. Metaphorically. There is no time limit for God. Now, the number, the frequency, these are all the goals, the ideals, the pure, ripe fruits. Now we can look at this stepping stones along. But before we do that, let's take a break. Come back in a few minutes, and we'll start into some specific stepping stones, okay? Now, the fruits that I was talking about are listed in the pamphlet. They're on page 3 and 4. And I want to turn our attention to page 5. You got them there?
Hopefully you have some, Bob.
I brought them down. Oh, that's because they're over there. No, right there on the. Gee, I couldn't even get out of the workshop without another humiliation. Thank you, Lord.
Oops, I'm so sorry.
Between the bed, thank you.
If you turn to page 5, you'll see waypoints on the journey of spiritual transformation. And since this is not a physical journey, so we're not in one place at one time, on a spiritual journey, on a mental journey, you can be in multiple places at the same time. And on these fruits, okay, these are these fruits that are, if you will, the dance steps of perfect welcoming, perfect letting go, perfect celebrating, perfect forbearing, perfect restoring, perfect love. And the thing that we know is that in this growth, it's a transition, it's a gradual, step by step. And so understanding it from that idea of a rheostat on a light bulb, it's a continuum. And since there's multiple fruits, we're not just producing apples, but we're going to produce apples and oranges and pomegranates and whatever, all these different diverse fruits. We can be at different stages with each individual fruit. So you've got to understand that with each fruit, you might be at a different stage. And so some of the fruits you may hardly have even started on. And others, you might be very well along the road. And as you start to understand it, you see that your steps in this dance you're learning. So some of the, it's, what is the, in Texas country dancing, there's a Texas two-step, but then there's a 10-step or something. In other words, there's multiple steps in a dance. And so you might have a few of them down very well, or almost even perfect. Maybe not totally perfect, but really very proficient. And other steps you're still struggling with. And so in these fruits that you're looking to develop, just keep that in mind. And so the waypoint that you're at is a mixture. And you might have been working, this Lent I worked on being non-judgmental. And you may have achieved. I mean, optimally, the goal of Lent is not to just give up candy for 40 days. What is the reason you want to give up candy? How is that going to make you a better disciple? Moderation, lose weight. What is your goal? Our goal is to live Trinitarian life. So maybe during Lent you chose to try and work on your judgmentalism, or to work on your optimism, or work on your expectations, or what are the fruits that you're looking to cultivate. And so it's a gradual and it's a mixture. So looking at page 5, we're going to say the spiritual journey is this journey of transformation along a continuum marked by degrees of change, and the changes in the manifested number, the degree, and the frequency of the fruits. And each fruit has its own dimmer switch, its brightness or effectiveness. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples. We're not going to go through everything that's in the pamphlet here, but just to start out with, at one point, you can consider that people who are raised in a religious tradition or a background will start somewhere where they acknowledge God, they think about God occasionally, but they don't regularly talk to God. I mean, how often do you really talk to God, Generally, it might be only when you go to church, or, oh my gosh, I'm praying for Aunt Sally because she's sick. And so your relationship with God is kind of limited, or very limited. But it can grow. Maybe you start to become more comfortable at it, and you start to see God not just as a judge and jury and executioner, as like we talked the different concepts of our relationship with God last time. We're not just slaves or even servants, but we're called to be friends. How does a friend act? Well, if you only talk to somebody once a week, they're not that close of a friend, maybe. Or if you only talk to them when you need something, what kind of a friend are they? So you can see that as you develop your relationship with God, the manner of communication with God. Is it daily? Is it multiple times a day? Is it a running commentary? My wife and I, both retired, spend a lot more time together now than we ever did. Okay? And I must admit that even in the time, that we've been retired, our communications has continued to grow. And it's interesting that sometimes we're communicating without even talking. But we also find ourselves just needing to be in each other's presence more often. You know, all right, how you doing, honey? She's downstairs quilting. I'm doing fine. How you doing? I think I'm going to run to the grocery store. You want me to come along? I said, if you want. You know. And depending on how she's feeling, she may sit in the car while I'm in the grocery store, or she'll come in and walk around with me. Or vice versa. She's going to go here, and I say, well, you know. We like to spend time together. Like we don't spend enough time together already. But we enjoy each other's company. How are you spending time with God? Don't judge it. See, that's another fruit you're working on, being non-judgmental, right? But evaluate it. So that you can say, gee, maybe I've been shortchanging my dear friend. Or, boy, I spend a lot of time talking to God. I never thought about that. That's one of my top 10 things I enjoy about the day is my conversations with God. One of the things that I recommend people do if they're really serious about the spiritual journey is to start what I call a spiritual journal. And that is every night, sometime before you go to bed, and sit down in a notebook or a journal book of some sort and all, and have a conversation with God about the day. It's not a typical regular journal, well, I did this and this and this and this and this and this and this. But it could include saying, well, you know, I did this and that. But include in it, like any conversation you might have with a friend, share. Forget about the fact that God's been with you the whole day and knows exactly. Build within yourself that sense of relationship, of the presence, and talk. Have a coffee clutch with God. Now, if you want to do it in the morning, first thing, or midday, well, you know. But what I'm saying is have a sit down with God. Ask a question. Gee, I don't know what I should be doing about this. Or this has been bothering me. Like you would do with any friend, good, close friend. And you just do that every day. I've been doing it since 1998. I missed a few days.
No.
And every day, like tonight, I will write and have my little conversation. But before I do that, I'll go back and I'll read what I wrote on April the, whatever this is, April, oh, look at that, May the 3rd, from 1998, May the 3rd, 1999, May the 3rd, 2000. And interesting, it's starting to get a little long to read. And now I'm with the dilemma, okay, God, do I want to go back and read these all? I haven't asked that question yet, I might ask that question. But anyway, I run across one that I'll have asked a question. Like in 1999, Marianne and I went to Assisi on a pilgrimage. And we were at a mountain called the Carceri, which I believe means jail in Italian. But it was a hermitage that Francis started, and some knight king, somebody, gave him this mountaintop, which was good for nothing. and it was used as a jail. And it overlooked the valley. And he set up little, they dug out holes in the sides of the cliffs and everything, and little hermitages. And we had mass in one of these. And that night I had started this journal when we went. And I wrote, "Is there a mountaintop somewhere in the Ozarks for me?" One year later, in 1 year, I originally thought it was like 1 year to the day, but it was like 1 year within 3 days. I think this was like on November the 3rd of 99, and on like November the 6th of 99, in that year, I had lost my position at St. Anthony of Padua as an associate pastor. The Franciscans reorganized and that position went away. So I was without a job. Within 3 days, I got a call from the Bishop of Jefferson City Diocese asking if I would take over a parish in central Missouri. And I wound up as the pastoral administrator of the parish in Cole County, on the highest hill in Cole County. Is there a mountaintop for me somewhere in the Ozarks? You'll find that you'll ask questions, and over time, some way, somehow, they will be answered in your life. It's just establish and to complete that story, 6 months before I was offered the position, Mary Ann went in to see whether or not she could retire, because she was the oldest practicing clinical therapist, physical therapist in the St. Louis area at the time, and it was just beating her up. And she was told she had 5 years before she could retire. She was at the VA. And she said, "Oh, I don't know how long I'm going to make it." And I said, "Well, you do what you can, whatever." Well, within 4 months after that, I got this invitation to go out. And, I had left McDonnell Douglas early and lost a major part of my retirement when I did that, to go into full-time ministry. And I said, "Well, go check with Human Resources and find out whether or not, how much you lose of your retirement if you left early." And she went in and discovered that they had just started a new program because of budget constraints and everything, that if you could, if your supervisor would say you were replaceable, you could retire up to 5 years early at full retirement. Of course, she was the most senior therapist, and they could hire a brand new college graduate for half the cost that it was. So her supervisor had no problem whatsoever in letting her retire 5 years early at full retirement. And 2 days after that was 2 days after I got the call to go to jail. But I couldn't go because I didn't get released from the diocese, St. Louis. Archbishop Regali didn't sign my release to move to Jeff City. And in the meantime, my aunt, who was like a second mother to me, took ill. And I couldn't leave, so her daughters were out of town, and I essentially became the in-town relative taking care of her arrangements. She was in the hospital, and they would come in town and stay for as long as they could. She eventually passed away. I did her graveside service. We went back home afterwards, And in my mailbox waiting for me was the letter from Archbishop Regali saying that I was free to go. Within 6 days I was gone. Never underestimate the providence of God. Generally, one of the things, if we look at in this first waypoint on page 6, one of the things you'll see about 4 bullets down is little in life is seen as an opportunity. You need big things to be seen as an opportunity. If you go down to waypoint 2, you see increased experiences of the divine presence start to occur in more routine and ordinary events in life. And then that progresses to a point where one experiences in waypoint 3 on page 7, one experiences the divine presence as increasing in everyday life. You experience a dramatic reduction in the need to ask for favors, accompanied by a heightened trust in the love flowing from the beloved to help. Bargaining is seen for the childishness that it is. Meaning, oh God, if you do this for me, I will do this. And you get to realize that God's favors aren't dependent upon anything. But it's this gradual continuance, and I just recommend that you go through the whole pamphlet from start to finish to see these steps as the fact that we are, and I mentioned this the last time, everything's one, everything's connected. So as you open yourself to it, it's like breaking down a dam, slow brick by brick or shovel full of mud by shovel full of mud. The water starts to flow more until there's no restriction whatsoever. And the oneness becomes a symphony of dancing, just an absolute, not that there isn't the daily humiliations or twice a day, when you get somewhere an hour early, or you forget that you didn't put the pamphlets out on the table, but they're just that little reminder that you're still on the journey, you're still on the road. I'd like to end if I can find it.
Creation as that existence or nature in relationship to God. I take creation as that existence or nature in relationship to God. So creation always points to Creator, and so creation is everything from the rocks, the stars in the sky, to the sand on the beach, to the water, to the little animals, to us. So we're all part of this creation. And when we say everything is Christic, is because really we're saying that the incarnation, or God loving the world, is God loving every single aspect of the world, every single quark, lepton, grain of sand, little butterfly. God loves everything into existence. How? Because everything is expressing God. Everything is some way expressing something about, even a quark expresses something about God. And you think, what? Because we're so used to thinking of Jesus, but Jesus, let's have kind of a real-time take on Jesus. If Jesus is truly human, then we have to admit that Jesus then also comes by way of evolution, right? God is at work in evolution all along the way. And I know that's been really hard, if not scandalous, for a lot of people to accept. But either we accept it, or you've got to get rid of all your modern equipment because it's all come about by evolution, right? You can't parcel out some things and then want to keep others. So when we say that, we're meaning love. How does love become incarnate? What does that mean? And, it's again because we have no real understanding of matter. I think matter is a form of energy. Well, it is. That's what science tells us, right? And matter is a form of energy. And what if, from all eternity, these energy particles, these energy particulars, have been entangled with God from what we might say in the mind of God forever and ever. And then God, freely decides to express that idea or that particular in this point in this time. I mean, it's a mystery, and I never want to resolve a mystery, the mystery of God creating to a logic, logical, analytical answer. But all we can say is that when God creates, God loves what God enters into what God creates. And so I think all along the way, and that God incarnating is the Christ, right? It's that wholeness in love, that unity in love. So, Gerard Manley Hopkins had a great sense of what we call the scotistic. So it's Duns Scotus, the Franciscan theologian, really, who helped us appreciate what he called the thisness, right? This person and this leaf, bears the love of God within it, the Christification or the Christ. Imagine if we had a culture or a society of thisness, where you can't just, people are not algorithms, we're not numbers, we're not statistics, we're actually unique, unclonable expressions of divine love. I mean, could you imagine, like every poor person, every homeless person, every Muslim, every black, white, Asian, whatever you are, every gang member, you are a unique, unclonable expression of the love of God. Would we do what we do to people? Because what we do is we say, no way that person can be, love of God. I mean, they're just wicked people, and we should just get rid of them, or replace them. Maybe we could have a robot in their place. We don't need them anymore, and that's where we have. This is where institutional religion has not helped, by the way. It has not really come. I think there's no Christian church that has really taken the incarnation as the starting point for understanding who God is.
Say that again?
There's no, from the point of Christianity, there's no institutional religion that has taken the human person as the starting point for who God is. But that must be our starting point. Because there's something about us that bears in an unimaginable depth and breadth and love. Look, see, and respond. Not judge.
What would
Look,
look, see, and reject?
And respond, because where there is love, one responds in love, right? And what's the response in love? You would never want to say, well, I'm going to kill you because really you're just, if someone truly loves someone, they're not going to say, truthfully, you are just one block to my entire life. I'm just going to eradicate you.
Maybe not everybody's creating God's image. Maybe you're just a little hopeful.
Maybe you're just a little hopeful, right? Yeah, right. Because we are the worst judgers. We're so harsh in our judgment. Humans are the worst, and I really think, in all honesty, we're the problem to this whole planetary life, because we're hard on one another, we're hard on ourselves, we doubt, we're suspicious, we're critical, we have no sense of love at all, no sense of a deep, attractive power at the heart of our life that's, and so we don't respond in compassion, we don't respond in a sense that respects the other as other, even if we disagree with them. Even if we don't see things the same way, right? If people don't agree with us, we just eradicate them, whether it's verbally, psychologically, or however it is, or physically, and I think what we have created a society of deep loneliness, deep isolation. And, I look at some of the horrendous gun violence in our own time, and I ask, what has driven these people to such despair that the only alternative is to take up a gun and exterminate people? I mean, what has unraveled in the human mind? And do we have a part to play in that? And I think we need a little humility here. We need to own up, maybe, just because we don't tend to the love that.
Can you hear the cry for the need to celebrate what is worth celebrating? Can you hear the need to forbear, to have mercy, to not judge, to look to how can we restore, how can we help, how can we infuse love? That sense of what we're missing is this spirit of welcoming and letting go, of not possessing. The face of love is a willingness to sacrifice, to give up everything for. That is the symbol of the cross, willing to give up everything out of love.
Is in our midst. Do we have a part to play? You asked about creation groaning. We're not finished. Creation does groan aloud, right? And I think today, I think global warming, and I think the increased incidence of tornadoes and hurricanes and the severity of these natural events is Earth not only groaning, but is crying out, that we are not loving, we do not love the Earth. We don't even attend to the Earth. We are lost in a shopping mall someplace, for Black Friday sales. And so we're unattentive, and we will be our own undoing. We will, if we do blow things up, it will be because we have chosen not to love. We have chosen not to attend to the depth of God in our midst. And it will be our own demise. I do think nature, though, will go on quite well without us, as I always say. Nature will be like...
We die trying to protect our religions.
Yes, we die trying to protect our religions.
Missing the point.
Exactly. And I think nature will be like, well, now, and God will be okay,
Like, what should we do with the dirt this time?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's play.
Because God will always be creative, always be bringing about something new. Love can never be conquered or quenched. And so I do think it will go on for, 10 million more years, or however many more years, again, for, one to grow into a conscious being in love and to respond in love. And that's really what we're called to do.
Love will go on. Remember watching programs, I don't know if it was Discovery Channel or Nature, or one of those, and how in the most formidable environments, life can be found. Not only found, but thriving. My gosh, Mount St. Helena erupted and all that devastation, and they said, oh, it's going to be so long. And within a short period of time, sprouts of grass and things started to burst forth. It just, life cannot be denied. Love cannot be denied. Whether we recognize it or not, I think is really what she's saying. And our hope, our future, is that we not just recognize it, but we open ourselves to it. And the best way to open ourselves to it is to get in lockstep with it. And the more we learn through science, through psychology, through theology, is that it's all one. It's all permeated. So those of us of faith who can see beyond just the physical and can acknowledge that spirit that is alive and at work, can open ourselves, I think, more fully to the flow of that spirit. And that's what we're called to give it all. To pick up our cross daily. To follow in the footsteps of welcoming, not possessing, not letting it just be here, but to let it be. And we do that by celebrating what is worth celebrating. Even if it's a partial step, we celebrate the half a glass of water. And we forbear that it's only half a glass. You know, when we use that up, there'll be more somewhere, somehow. God will provide. And if we have to help dig a well, we will restore water to the community. It's the way nature is knit together. It is the Paschal mystery, it is evolution. One and the same type concept. Resurrection follows death. That's what we're celebrating. We're in the middle of celebrating that right now. Easter season. And we're going to be celebrating not just the ascension at the end of this season, but the culmination is the coming of the Spirit into all. It's there. Your temple. Celebrate it, embrace it. Be one as the Father is one with the Son and the Spirit. I thank you for coming. I hope this has been not just an enlightening, but a challenging. Because if it's challenging, it means we're on the journey. And we have another step to take. Maybe I'll remember to show up at the right time next time.
I hope you come back.
So, thank you so much. If there's anything that you want to discuss or comments that you'd like to make, pass them on to Steve or to Carolyn, and we'll take it from there.